Special guest in the house, guys. Welcome, man. We got Haas and Andrew Wilson in the house. Andrew's been here a million times, but Haas, this is your first time on. Welcome to the Fresh&Fit podcast. Whoever wants to go first, introduce themselves, man.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson. I'm the host of The Crucible. To those of you who are watching from The Crucible, what's up, Crucible crew? Make sure to come over here, donate generously to Fresh&Fit. The reason you should is because they put this debate together, and we were able to do it in person because of that. So I think, I think Myron, you've like fresh off a... You just got right out of a plane, came right into the studio.
30 minutes ago, man.
A debate. So, yeah, he made it happen. That was great. And so come over and show a little bit of love to Fresh&Fit.
I'm Haz Aldin. The host of the Infrared Show. It was a political live streaming show that was mainly on Twitch before I got banned, moved to YouTube, and is now on Kick. I'm also the executive chairman of the American Communist Party, which is a recently launched communist party that consists of myself, Jackson Hinkle, the Midwestern Marx crew, and several others on the executive board. And
is that where you did that recent speech?
No, the speech I did was in Dearborn, and that was for the Institute for a Free America, which is a different thing.
Okay.
So I guess audience wants to know, what's your stance on communism itself?
Me or...
Yeah.
Well, unless you wanted to mention in your opening statement.
No, it's okay. I could get into it.
Please,
yeah. So I regard myself as a capital C communist, which is the real deal, a real type of Marxist-Leninist orthodox, just as in the Soviet Union with Stalin, and China with Mao, China today, communist states in general around the world. And typically this is something that is foreign and not very prevalent in the Western countries, in the United States in particular, because here the self-identified communists are mainly just liberals who are becoming increasingly radicalized in the direction of wherever the Democratic Party is going. So I'm a communist in the sense that, the communism in the sense of leading nations through industrialization and focusing on the development of the productive forces and, focusing on consolidating sovereignty and political dictatorship in such a way that can't be usurped by the interests of the capitalist class. So this type of communism is not very much... the history of it in the United States is limited. The golden age of the Communist Party here was in the 1930s, right? And then with the Cold War, the onset of the Cold War, the rest is history. They began to persecute them, and then they basically became irrelevant. And then afterwards, you had the rise of liberalism, left liberals. You had so-called... leftism, which was mainly based in students rather than the industrial workers that were the base of historical communism. So Jackson Hinkle and I and others, we represent a revived communist tendency in the United States. We're trying to restore something that has been lost in this country, which is a type of politics that's based in the working class, based in the interests of the common people, and which brings to the fore the economic question, the property question, back into politics.
Okay. So the way we're going to do this, guys, is we're going to have so first we're going to have opening statements. It's going to be 5 minutes where they're going to be able to, because this is going to be kind of a broad debate. Obviously, we talked about capitalism versus communism, but there's going to be other things as well, because the topic is what caused the issues in the United States, and obviously that's going to come into play and a multitude of other factors. So we're going to have opening statements, 5 minutes each to state their arguments, and then we're going to have 5 rounds, 3 minutes each, where they're going to be able to make their arguments, uninterrupted, of course, and then we're going to have 3 rounds, 5 minutes each, where it's open dialogue and they're able to kind of go back and forth and speak at the same time. So who wants to go first, by the way?
I can open first.
You want to go open first? All right, cool. So let's put 5 minutes on the clock. I'll have my timer here as well. And we'll hand it off to Andrew, and he'll make his first opening statements. And we got to watch 2 bills on the side?
Give me 1 minute.
Yeah, bills will fire one up. But I'll keep mine for now. Okay, Andrew, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so first I want to thank you guys, of course, for hosting, and Haas for coming out here today. I've known Haas for a long time, way back when I started streaming, it was around the same time he started streaming. I've always liked him personally, I just hate his politics, right? So I think that's a fair assessment. So we're getting to what is the root cause in America of the problem. It comes down to the founding of the Enlightenment principles of the United States, which in this founding of these Enlightenment principles, we had no American identity. There was no American identity which we were able to adopt. The egalitarian and Enlightenment principles have led to the current kind of progressive, I would almost say, zeitgeist that you see now. So to go through what these principles are for egalitarianism, the idea that all men are created equal, for instance, these are all Enlightenment principles. Now, Haas, he kind of adheres to a philosopher named Hegel. Hegel was part of the idea of many of these Enlightenment principles, in fact. I reject Enlightenment principles categorically, and I believe that those Enlightenment principles are the direct root. Now, that said, I also think that Bolshevik murderous Jewish communists killed the Orthodox king. They killed the Orthodox king in Russia. They did a Bolshevik takeover of the entire nation. I do think that this is part of what is considered a revolutionary spirit, and that spirit is alive and well inside of the communist ethos and ideology. And I think that communists often pretend that it's not, but it is. The idea of continual revolution. And that is part of the egalitarian principle of the United States, which was founded on revolution. So I think that this is a huge problem inside of this ideology. Now I'm going to move, because it's such a broad topic, I have to kind of move around a little bit. To kind of understand the central communist plot, the idea is, and Marxist theory is pretty broad, but the general idea here is a continual social revolution until we get to the point where we get it right, whatever that means, right? The reason I wanted to do this debate specifically with Haas is because what I don't want is traditional commie speak. And here's what I mean about this. It's language academic prattle that relies on communist linguistics without actually speaking plainly what it is that you mean to say. So what I'm asking Haas to do tonight for me and for the audience is to just speak very plainly. And the reason that I'm asking that is because, and you know this, there's tons of communists who do obfuscation by moving towards Marxist principles, and they have distinct meanings which are different than the meanings how we see them in the commons. Example of this is freedom. Perhaps Marx has a distinct definition or way he views freedom, and I don't know exactly what that's going to be. I'm going to view it a different way. So I would like it to be plain speak and not typical Marxist prattle. So that's why I wanted to do this debate specifically with you. And now you kind of have the outline of how I view the world, why I view Marxism as such a problem and communism as such a problem, and what the root is of the problems inside of America, which start with egalitarian principles. I believe that communists take advantage of egalitarian principles. They always plan to take advantage of those principles to institute communism. All and with that, I'll yield my time.
Okay. All right. I'll put 5 minutes on the clock for Haas, whenever you're ready.
I'm not a big fan of semantics. I don't think anyone is. It obfuscates the ability to communicate words clearly and get the meaning across. However, I think an exception should be taken in semantically speaking for something that's actually not necessarily Marxism. Let's just begin with Christianity and the Lord's Prayer. Let's begin with the etymology of the word sin in Christianity itself. And scholars will find that etymologically and linguistically, they'll find that the word sin can be traced back to debt. And the Lord's Prayer, which says, forgive us of our sin, and Jesus, who announces in his first sermon, the Jubilee year, which was a cyclical tradition among the Jews to cancel a debt every so often. The core of the whole thing was about debt, and that's what really my view about the chief contradiction or the problem of America stems from. I mean, we could go to the Enlightenment, and defining exactly what that is, I think, would be difficult, although we could use Kant's definition and so on. But in my view, the root cause of America's decay and the root cause of America's problem is actually very simple. It's debt. It's the fact that our total liabilities have far surpassed our assets. There is no way that the total national debt in the United States could ever imaginably ever be paid off. The amount of personal income, household debt that Americans have could never be paid off. And we are faced with a problem where the debt is being used as a pretext for the 1%, an extremely small minority of exploiters and capitalists, to gobble up and seize all of the assets and all of the wealth of this country on the basis of them being collateralized in the first place. So, to me, the real root cause of the problem is that we are being held to an economic principle, namely the strict kind of the narrow terms of a very ruthless form of capitalism, and we're being crucified and penalized for having basic economic needs that we need met, not only at the level of public spending, but at the level of individuals who need to get by and make a living for themselves. And just because of that, they're being punished with endless and self-multiplying and unpayable debt. And to me, communism, if you want to simplify it as far as how I see it in this country, communism means canceling the debt. This is precisely what those murderous Bolsheviks did, which is what incurred the response of every major great power on planet Earth invading revolutionary Russia in 1917, 1918, because what was Lenin's first act? He canceled all of the foreign debt. The Tsar had accumulated all of this debt from the French banks in order to finance the limited extent of industrial development that he was partaking in. And the debt was unpayable. It was immiserating the Russian people, the Russian peasant. They were becoming slaves. They were becoming proletarianized. So what does the revolutionary Bolsheviks do when they take power? They cancel the debt. I don't think the elites really care about your ideology as much as they care about what you do. And the one thing consistently we see across history is that when you cancel the debt, when you raise the question, the property question of debt, you are touching upon something that they regard as very sensitive. You're touching upon the very source of the power of the international capitalist class, the thing that allows them to gobble up and steal and loot the material wealth of all mankind. And to me, communism is already in the Bible. You know, it's not necessarily something that begins just with Marx. The revolutionary message of Jesus Christ, and I do regard him as a revolutionary, was to cancel the debt. And it's also my message. I'll yield the rest of my time if there's any.
All right, yeah. There's a minute left, but I guess we'll go into round one.
So are you saying communism is freedom?
Yes, I think so. I mean, if you look at the Liberty Bell, it uses a term, a Hebrew term. I think you'll have to forgive me because I don't think I remember it exactly. It's something Durir or something like that. Anyway, the term refers to the emancipation of debt servants. It refers to the emancipation of people who had to pledge their families, their land, and even themselves because they couldn't pay back debt to the creditors. So this is even on the Liberty Bell that we have here in the United States using that term.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go into round one, so we kind of see where both of you stand. I guess I'll give a quick summary here. For those of you that are just tuning in, we're having a debate on what led to degradation in the United States, what the root cause problem is, and obviously we're going to get into the topic of capitalism versus communism. But Andrew's stance is he rejects Enlightenment. He believes that Enlightenment was the beginning of the end here, and Marxism. And Haas is more along the lines of debt is the main problem, and communism solves that. Would that be fair summation of what you guys said?
Sure.
Obviously, I grossly
you're
simplified
paraphrasing.
it.
We understand. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So we're going to round one here. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock for Andrew. Andrew, whenever you're ready, I'll start it.
Sure.
3 minutes on the clock. Yep. From this point forward, we're going to do 5 3-minute rounds, and then we're going to do 3 5-minute rounds, and then we're gonna have a Zoom call after this, by the way, guys. So you guys in the Q&A, and you guys can interact with us and have a good discussion with the Cast Club guys. So that'll be after. So stay tuned. Whenever you're ready, Andrew, and I got my time here.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the idea that communism would be necessary to cancel out debt is absurd. It's absurd on its face. We have plenty of history to demonstrate this. Andrew Jackson already did this. Andrew Jackson killed the central bank. He used the entirety of his administration to pay off all the national debt, which he did. Okay, so why communism would be necessary to pay off the national debt, I have no idea. There's certainly tons of systems and models which could be used that are non-Keynesian to do this. So I have no idea where their criticism is. If you're saying that debt can be crippling to a nation, I totally agree with you. However, communist nations in the past, including Stalin's nation of Russia, was also under crippling debt. I mean, communism did not prevent it at all from incurring a massive amount of debt, which also led to financial collapse, in fact, because it didn't have access to external capital and needed it very desperately, in fact, I would say, in order to keep its country propped up. So I would kind of categorically reject first in term of we need communism to cancel the debt. We have a historic example. The president already did this in Andrew Jackson. He completely killed a central bank concept, gave the ability to Congress to coin money, paid off the entirety of the national debt. He had nothing to do with communism whatsoever, most certainly wasn't a communist. Communism had nothing at all to do with that. And I'd like to start there. Maybe I can start the inquiry there so that we can just kind of dive into it without kind of bloviating for 3 minutes, so we can just get right into it.
Okay, all right. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock for Haas to respond to that. Go ahead.
Sure. I think that the problem, though, is that even if we accept at face value that Andrew Jackson somehow, in this sweeping way, acted against the creditor class, which I think is false. I think what he actually did was he got rid of the Hamiltonian, which is more like a national bank, not necessarily a central bank like the Federal Reserve, which is strictly privately owned. And that could also be interpreted as a pro-creditor move. But even Andrew Jackson, what is he regarded as historically? He's regarded as a populist, right? So what communism and Marxism will often talk about, politically speaking, is that society is divided by a class struggle. And if you want to act against the interests of creditors, you have to have your base of support somewhere. And if your base of support is not in the people who have all the money and have all the resources and have all the wealth, it seemed like at face value you're going to be screwed. But actually, the multitudes, the majority of people, the working class, that's a base of support that could be relied upon to achieve goals that are in favor of them, right? There's more of them. Numerically. So that's an advantage that can be drawn. So part of the historical class struggle is always this struggle between a ruling class and the masses, which are part of a different class, right? And in the case of Andrew Jackson and other cases of populist leaders, I mean, for example, even the Farmers Alliance and the Populist Party, they were calling for a cancellation of debts, and they weren't Marxists and they weren't explicitly communists. But as long as they're unable to scientifically understand the ability for their strategy to work and succeed, as long as they're unable to understand the dynamics I just mentioned, that it's a class struggle, that you need this reliable basis of support, inevitably what's going to happen is exactly what did happen in American history. The creditors will return. Again, this is off of the premise that Andrew Jackson was an anti-creditor president, which I disagree with. But even if we assume that was true, it's clear that the way history played out was exactly the opposite. It's clear that the banking class, the creditor class, actually emerged here in the United States from the indigenous industrial capitalists that were promoted already under Lincoln, right? So I would respond basically with, well, why did the debt come back if it was so simple?
Yeah, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
I will go. Okay, so that concludes that round one. We'll go ahead to round two. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock again, and go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so I mean, this is going to be a continual struggle. As long as you have leadership which wants access to money, the only thing that they can do is offer up their people as a form of credit for that money. That's the only thing they could do is offer up the tax base as a form of credit. You know this, and I know this. This is the way that all nations basically back up what they need as far as credit for their nation. They're going to put the taxpayer as the kind of collateral for whatever the loan is that they need. So the reason that this is kind of occurring again and again and again cyclically, I would actually say that this is due to egalitarian principles. So this idea where you're taking humanity out of this, I think that what happens with egalitarian principles is they form small microgroups. These microgroups then have their own assessed and addressed interests. And once they realize that they can raid the treasury via the vote, once they realize that they can vote in their own interest to steal your money, whatever these groups are which formulate, they will do that. And that is part of I think, democracy in and of itself and egalitarianism in and of itself. Communism does nothing to solve for that. How would communism, absent a central authority, where it was some type of totalitarian dictatorship, I do not understand how communism can actually solve for this issue. if you're going to allow people to participate in any sort of democratic process whatsoever, and you're going to allow them to participate in any sort of government process whatsoever, they're going to have to be able to vote or somehow participate. Once they realize that they can steal, Group A can steal from Group B via the vote, they will do so, because Group A will always outnumber Group B will always outnumber Group C. They can always vote themselves Group A, B, C, and D's money. All you need to do is have the numbers. Communism, this was known, was a big problem with. This is why Giovanni Gentile himself kind of points to the idea of these large trade corporations swallowing up the smaller trade corporations. Now, these were actually trade unions, but he kind of understood. He came from the idea of Marxism and communist theory. So he says, well, wait, we need a body of the state which can control for these small groups coming in and basically taking over these other groups just via numbers. You point to this yourself when you say, look, they have the numbers. I agree. Group A has the numbers. Group A can always vote or use force to take from Group B. You still haven't really explained to me how communism solves for this problem. I don't understand how communism itself or Marxist theory is going to solve for that very human problem.
Okay. I'll turn it back to Haas here. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock, and whenever you're ready.
I'm a little bit confused about exactly what you're talking about, because it seems clear to me from concrete historical examples that the only forces politically in modern world history that have ever been able to wage and mount a long-term defiance of the global creditor class, and which is therefore the global capitalist class, have obviously been communist states. I mean, what loans did Stalin need to take out and get the Soviet Union into? What loans did China need to take out under Mao in order to enslave and indebt their country to international capitalists? No such thing, because we have to look at the source of where credit comes from. Credit doesn't just come out of thin air. It comes from actually controlling the means of production. I don't want to use Marxist jingo because I know you have a kind of allergy to that, but
it's fine to do. Just explain what the term means.
Means of production. It just means the fundamental way in which the basic necessities, economic necessities of your country are produced. How do people get clothed? How do they get fed? How do they get shelter? Right? How are things made? So this is the natural resources. This is the factories. This is the technology. These are all the fundamental meat and potatoes of an economy that are necessary for human beings in a given context of civilization to exist as they do. So credit, the ability to actually issue credit, comes from a fundamental stranglehold and control over means of production. Historically speaking, it was always land. If you controlled the land, you could use that land as collateral to give out loans and further gobble up more land, because debtors would have to pledge their land in order to take out the loans. So historically, this is the origin of pro kind of creditor classes emerging across many different eras of history. But in the case of the capitalist era, it's actually clear that we have an ownership of the means of production that is purely for profit, which is owned by us and gobbled up by a small minority, which inevitably culminates in monopolists like the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Morgans, and so on and so on. And they are the ones who actually built the foundation of the Federal Reserve banks in the United States. If it wasn't for the fact that they owned the railways, they owned the oil, they owned all of the factories, and so on, the steel, the rise of the Federal Reserve and the pro-creditor policies we see today wouldn't have been possible. So this communism solves this problem because the fundamental means of production are owned in common. They're owned by the state, they're owned by the people in some other form, and this prevents the need, it prevents the need from taking out foreign loans necessarily in order to develop your country. You can develop from scratch. Now, there's drawbacks from that because it creates instabilities that, historically, I won't deny, have led to brief but very, very severe, economic dysfunction, right?
10 seconds.
Yeah. So, but I don't see the problem. I don't see how communists haven't solved this problem. I don't understand what you're getting at there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's 3 minutes. We're going to go on to round 3. Put 3 minutes on the clock again. We got chats. I'll read chats after this round because they're in the middle of a good thing here. You ready, Andrew?
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, you still haven't actually explained how communism has solved this issue. So, yes, it's true that rich industrialists definitely got together with the political class in order to pass the Federal Reserve Act. There's no doubt that that's true. I agree with you that there's a groundwork setting for this with rich industrialists who definitely move towards the Federal Reserve. There's just no doubt. That's a matter of historic fact. However, you still haven't really explained how it is that you would prevent Group A, if they're going to participate in your communist utopia or society, from stealing the wealth of Group B, right? As long as they can vote or somehow participate in the political process, they can vote themselves Group B shit. There's not, I don't understand how communism solves for that. You say, well, the state owns the means of production along with the people. So when it comes to credit, well, the people are still going to be the form of credit. You say, well, traditionally it was land. That's true, but people have to work the land. So it's still the people who are the credit, right? They're still whatever the bond is for your collateral. So if you're a nation and you want to take out a big loan, you're going to say, hey, we can pay this loan back because here's our tax base, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. You still haven't actually explained how in communism, if people are allowed to participate in the political process, how do you prevent them from stealing the capital if they have a larger group than Group B? Can you just directly answer? It's still my time, but just go ahead and give the direct answer.
I mean, China is a communist country which doesn't have this problem. Does that not answer it? Because the reason they don't have the problem...
That's a mixed economy.
Well, look, the Soviet Union didn't have that problem, and neither did China, because in order for different private groups to constitute themselves as separate political interests...
They weren't allowed to participate, though.
You're right, precisely. That's the meaning of proletarian dictatorship. You have a one-party state. You don't allow different groups and private interests to constitute themselves as a political power.
So you want authoritarianism, ultimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so authoritarianism under a single person.
Not necessarily under a single person, but certainly under a single party.
Okay, so if we're moving towards authoritarian communism, right, now we can kind of move into...
The real kind, like historically.
Yeah. So now we can kind of move into the rest of it here. So this dictator, he's going to set all trade policies, right, or this authoritarian group. People themselves will be unable to participate inside of the government structure that you propose.
I completely disagree. I think that one-party dictatorships, such as in the Soviet Union and China, have been much more able to integrate the input and participation of the masses.
I don't mean to cut you off. It was a question, so it wasn't a disagreement.
Oh, okay. What's the question again?
I'm asking specifically.
10 seconds.
Are you just moving towards authoritarianism? If you're moving towards authoritarianism, unilateral authoritarianism, can you explain how that mode works?
Do you want me to answer directly, like how it works in historical
his time
examples?
is up, so we'll turn it over to you anyway. So, it's your turn. So and real quick, you guys are okay with that? Where you guys can ask, as long as you guys are both
cool.
okay with it?
Well,
cool.
sometimes we're going to have to clarify these things.
No
so
problem. So what I'll do is,
position.
this is what I'll do. If since you guys are like not like fucking idiots like other debaters, you guys can ask each other questions in the middle of your thing, and it'll count for your time, right? So that way we'll keep it fair. But you get like clarifying questions and stuff like that. This is a complex topic,
right?
All right, I'll turn it right over to you, man. 3 minutes. Go ahead.
When you just have a single party, which is based on the single purport that we want to increase the prosperity and serve the common interests of your country, then there's no more negotiation and political debates about like what the goal should be. Everyone's on the same page that the goal is about serving the common interests, serving the people, increasing the productive forces and the wealth, and so on and so on. Now that you've set that goal about, the question is, how do you acquire the input and the data from below, from the people who are the least assimilated within the party's power structure apparatus, in order to make decisions that are popular and reflect the sentiments and the reality, more importantly, of your people, right? Well, for example, we have historical examples that show how this would work. In China, at the lowest, most rural, smallest village level, you have party members that are there, that are leaders of their community, that are getting input from their community, that are actually accountable to their community. The accountability measures that as a party leader, as a local political leader, not even necessarily a party one, you have to perform. You have to be doing good for your community. If you're not performing, if you're doing bad by them and abusing your power, they'll report you to the person above, right? So this is not a matter of a hypothetical system we have to dream up and conjure from scratch.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Let me get clarity on 2 points, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So point one, when you say own the means of production, the people also own the means of production. What does ownership in this context mean?
that however the means of production are used, they have to be pledged ultimately in the last and final sense for a common goal, right? So, and whatever that common goal is defined by and by who, that's who owns it. So the Communist Party in China owns all of the land, right?
Right.
But they don't strictly define the parameters in every detail as far as how the land can be used. You can lease land from them and use it in ways that they can't account for beforehand, as long as it doesn't violate the fundamental goal, right? So if you're using the land in a way that ultimately benefits the country and benefits the overall goals of the party, you know, they're giving you room to be creative and entrepreneurial as far as how you're going to do that. But can you own land just for the purpose of, you know, of speculative profit,
Like,
or
what
just
if you just want it?
and you don't have any goal whatsoever?
You just
and
want it.
yeah, I mean, you have there. It needs to be something that is compatible with the overall goals of the country, right? So this is what is meant by ownership. It's not necessarily see, people have a misunderstanding about the communism as common ownership and state ownership, because they think it's a matter of a unilateral managerial control. That's not necessarily true. Control and ownership are two different things. Control is about management and administration and the degree to which there's flexibility and freedom for people to find different ways to realize the same
30
goal.
seconds.
But ownership is fundamentally about sovereignty, right? Ownership is about the fact that, okay, if you're in China, this is our land. Foreigners and bankers and capitalists, they can't just take this land and use it for willy-nilly to enslave all of us and hold it against us. It's ultimately ours in the last and final sense. So, instance, that's what I meant to say. So, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
I added 30
yeah.
seconds extra because he asked you a question in the middle.
Okay. Yeah,
that's why I
yeah.
added more time to you. That's time right there.
Yeah.
But did you want to finish your thought before I...
Yeah.
Completed opening round, right, where they gave their stance on everything. And then obviously 3 rounds back and forth. And then we're going to open it up for 5 minutes of open dialogue versus only 3. So it'll be a total of 5 rounds of open dialogue, 5 minutes apiece. And you guys will be able to kind of just have dialogue. Because you guys have pretty much established your grounding, and now it's more about like clarifying the other's position so that you can respond to it. So that makes more sense in this situation. Got to be fluid, right? We got here, Myron. Have you heard about Telegram CEO getting arrested for not moderating in individual chat groups? I know, bro. It's fucking crazy. What will this mean going forward for F&F Telegram group? Well, we still got our Telegram group, but it might have to move to Signal, man. This is wild. France is a failed nation. What else we got here? Eggy goes, WFNF for having such great content, especially this year. We got you guys. Always the best when Wilson is on the pod. W. Andrew, WFNF, God bless. So where are the beads at? Fucking beads.
Yeah.
Okay, that's from Como.
The beads. I told you, Mo, the beads.
Which, speaking of which, by the way, guys, we're going to actually have Haas and Andrew on tomorrow. We're going to do FNF News tomorrow, guys. Okay? And we're going to be... Mo, shut up, man. Goddamn, let me say what I'm saying. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and have FNF News tomorrow, guys, with Haas and with Andrew Wilson. Maybe we'll get Jackson Hinkle in here as well. It'll be a good conversation. And then, obviously, Wednesday, I think we're going to go ahead and drop the Dan Bilzerian interview. So we're going to do the debate tonight, and then FNF News will be tomorrow, guys. Tomorrow night, 9 or 10 p.m.
Nice change.
Yeah. What do we got here? Yomo, I sent you a DM on IG, AGL.SDL99.
No.
I'm trying to start.
No.
Oh, man. This
Nope.
dude, bro. Communism will win. Stop crying. Be men. Okay? That's from Janner. Myron needs to check his ears. Mo spoke fine. Okay. Disquiet. What else do we got here? Anything else? Oh, okay. Beyond Serapin, he goes, what does communism have to say about morality? Communism being a strictly materialistic philosophy, what's to stop degeneracy from developing in your communist utopia? All right, we'll get into that probably during the debate. And then we got what Haas means by brief economic disruption is the single greatest loss of human life in recorded history caused by mass famine. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Haas.
That's it's complete nonsense. China had cyclical famines regularly all the time before communism, so much so that nobody even noticed it. Nobody cared. You know, it's like in Africa today when we know everyone's starving, but we somehow don't attribute this to capitalism. We just say, they're starving. That's how it is.
Okay. What else we got here? All right, cool. So we're going to go ahead and put 5 minutes on the clock, guys. And we're going to go into more the open dialogue. We'll start with, I think it's on Andrew.
Andrew.
Yeah, so Haz, I appreciate you opening it up too, because some of this requires a lot of clarification so we can get to the heart of these positions.
Sure.
And you're welcome to ask me whatever you want. And if you think you have a point that needs to be clarified and you need to cut in, I'm not going to take any offense to that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So to kind of dive in here, I did notice something of a contradiction, and this is why I'm focusing on the ownership portion. What you mean by ownership here in the means of production. To me, ownership is this belongs to me, the individual. You're making kind of a different claim here. I think that ownership of property is a way to exercise power. And I think that you're trying to control that exercise of power at the individual level. And perhaps regulation could be good for that. But can you just clarify one more time, because we just had the break, what you mean by ownership here? Because when you gave the example of the Chinese, you said, well, wait a second. What can happen is they have a rep, and if the rep isn't doing, or
that's
the right thing, they move to the next rep.
That's just the ability to get people's input in the political process, not necessarily the fundamental ownership. The ownership is that all of the land, for example, in China, is either owned by the state or it's owned by the cooperatives at the village level collectively, and they have the power to lease out the land to whoever they want. And these leases are never permanent. They're, a few decades or something.
What about individual interests? Individual interest for land ownership for just the sake of having it.
Yeah.
Well, how could that be an immoral proposition? How could that be a proposition in which you can say this is wrong for a person to do, to actually own a thing which is then theirs?
Well, because it's not a matter of morality, it's a matter of power and politics. To own land, to truly own it, you have to conquer it by the sword. That's how you own land.
You don't need to, why would that be an entailment that it must be conquered by the sword?
Because there is no ownership of land to anyone or anything in history that was not conquered forcefully.
Perhaps you could say certain groups come in and they take land, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the land isn't even occupied, right?
Right.
They don't even need to use force. They just put up a flag and say, this is mine.
Yeah.
What makes it not theirs?
What makes it not theirs is, what makes it theirs historically from classical political economies, they'll say because their labor was used to cultivate the land and their labor is being used to participate in it, this is what makes it theirs. This is what makes it reflect their fundamental essence and their fundamental being, right? But when you have societies constituted by a very complex division of labor, where in order to produce the civilization itself at the aggregate level, you have a bunch of different moving parts and a bunch of different kinds of labor that are working together, that are necessary and indispensable for each other. I mean, for a factory, you need, there's so many different specialized roles just for something like that, right? That's just at the factory level. Now think of it at the level of a country. There's so many different types of labor that are necessary for a nation to exist, just to be able to feed itself and clothe itself and so on.
No disagreement there.
So how can we pin down, if you want to take this at a more moral level, that someone in particular is entitled absolutely to own this in the way that you're talking about, like at the level of sovereignty and power, when they are interdependent on others just as much as well?
Because if all we have is what's intuitive, and it seems like this is the system that you're advocating is intuition, I don't see how else you're advocating for anything other than and I'm going to be tongue-in-cheek a bit here, my preferences, right, and my intuition. Intuitively, people seem to want to own things themselves. They want those things to be theirs. They don't want them to be collective. For instance, right, I own my wife. Now, I don't mean ownership the same way that I would maybe own this studio or something like this.
Yeah.
But I think you understand the gist, or the geist, as Hegel would say, of what I'm getting at here. She's mine. I'm not sharing her. I'm not sharing my kids, right?
Now, aside from the wife thing, we can get into that later. But let's just say this mug. This is your mug. I want to drink out of it. I don't want to share with anyone else. It's mine. No. This is, I get what you're saying now.
Yeah.
This is my mug. I use it for something. It's mine. I'm the one who uses it, and it's mine, right? So you're giving content to it. You're using it in a way that is reflective of your humanity, reflective of your existence, and of course, any civilization recognizes and respects those boundaries. That this is yours because this is what you use, right? But here's the problem: capitalist private property isn't just about I want to use this, and that's what defines its exclusivity. It's about an institution where you're pledging fundamental means of production and resources that we all depend on and all rely upon for the sole and exclusive purpose of making a profit. Not even necessarily making profit for like a predefined goal of like, I want to get rich, I want to have a yacht with women, and I want to have a luxurious life. Even that would be more compatible with communism, because at least there's a goal that's human at the end of it, right? But the capitalist system doesn't have human goals. It's a maddening process of capital just self-expanding blindly only for the purpose of profit.
What you
And
call,
that's 5 minutes there. I was going to just let him
can
get
we
his thought.
extend it for a minute?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
So
Keep going. I'll
Haas-
put 2 minutes more on the clock. Go ahead.
These systems don't exist in a vacuum. When you say a capitalist system, you're talking about people. These are human beings who are at the heads of these systems. I don't believe that just because you're a capitalist, you're a monster. Of course, you don't believe that either.
No.
Nor if you're invested in a capitalist system, you're a monster.
No.
Clearly, though, people want to individually be able to have at least some autonomy, law, right? Law of yourself, to own things which are theirs and they share with nobody. It's not yours. It's not to help you. It's not to do anything for you. And you can go fuck yourself, right?
But that's just a personal use. That's for personal consumption.
Yeah, but the thing is like, why is it that would in any way? Well, but hang on. You said when I asked about private land ownership, you said no, you can't own that unless it's benefiting somebody else.
No. Okay, there's a misunderstanding there.
Okay.
I can clarify. I'm talking about, for example, owning fundamental means of production that like everyone relies upon, right? And you just saying, I want this just because I want it for no reason.
Yeah.
Well, that's if you want it just because you want to use it exclusively, that's still a reason, right? That's not for no reason. That's not an arbitrary thing. There's civilization, and it varies by what civilization we're talking about, recognizes boundaries by which, privacy of the individual is recognized. See, this is the thing that I think is so difficult, and I think this is maybe the language stuff you were talking about earlier, that, Marxists are obfuscating language. Well, it's because things didn't always mean what they mean to us now, like private property. We think of private property, we're like, this is my lawn, it's private property, fuck off and don't come on my lawn. Like, oh, that's private property. But in reality, the private part of private property wasn't that it was an exclusively individual or human use. It was that this was institutionally cast off for a reason that is totally antisocial, totally incompatible with civilization. Culminating in capitalism was just money for money's own sake.
Well, can you give me an example of what you mean when you say this? An example of private property being utilized this way when you say, well, what it actually is.
I would say
this
when banks own so many homes that are meant for people to live in, just for purposes of speculation and just for purposes of generating fictitious capital and fictitious profits that are not even productive. This is exactly what I'm talking about. A bank owns an asset.
Well, hang on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's back up. I'm talking on the individual level. Before we get to the corporate level.
That's the beautiful thing about what I'm talking about here. That's the kicker. We tend to think that capitalism promotes individual ownership and individual autonomy or whatever, but the opposite is true. Capitalism has led to banks owning everything, not individuals. And to me, that is exactly the consequence of the system of private property itself.
Yeah, but how would communism itself, the way that you are promoting it here, is not really telling us why we wouldn't just be shifting from bankers owning everything to just Group A owning everything. If you believe in force doctrine, Group A, in this case, government's just going to own everything. They'll allocate the housing how they see fit instead of the bank. It seems like all you're doing is shifting from one person who owns everything and is then utilizing speculation, everything else in order to, profit themselves, to just another group doing the exact same thing.
Well, I would say, although there's no guarantees that it would be perfect, I would say it would be an improvement. Why? Because the banker is accountable to no one. It's my private property. I can do whatever the fuck I want with it, and I'm accountable to no one. Even if you have a corrupt...
Haas, hang on.
Yeah.
Who the hell are you accountable to when you have the force doctrine on your side? Banks...
What do you mean?
One thing banks don't have... banks themselves don't have force doctrine. They rely on governments who they bribe to protect them from, the people or whatever.
They own the government.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But in this case, all you're doing is shifting the goal to the government doing the exact same thing you're claiming these banks are doing.
On what
now
basis?
They have all the machine guns too. What redress do you think the people have?
Okay, so even if we're talking about a corrupt authoritarian government that's communist or something, right? Even if it's corrupt.
Wasn't that all of them?
No.
No?
No, they weren't fundamentally corrupt. But even then, even if we assume they were, it's still better because even in order for them to not get overthrown instantly, right, they have to at least justify themselves on the basis that this is what we're using it for and have to be held to that standard. Even that, even if it was corrupt, that's better than if a banker owns everything or bankers own everything for totally antisocial purposes, just to, you know, systemically dysfunctional purposes, right? Ones that don't even make rational economic sense, just for the purposes of making money, but the money's backed up by nothing and it's self-multiplying because of the way interest works, and it's totally negating its own fundamental premises. It's not being reinvested.
Even if I agree that this could be superior to a banker class, right?
Yeah.
It seems like neither class is necessary for humans to be dominant. So humanity can still move towards its interests, absent having an authoritarian, autonomous, communist government.
What's an example of that, though?
So an example of people self-governing during Jackson's day, this happened often. So you can look at an example in American history. Often this was the case, that people self-governed, especially around land ownership. Now, you talk about people who bought up large swaths of land. That's true. But originally, you have to remember that that was done away with as well. You could not buy up X amount of acreage if it was outside of the public use. So the reason for this is they wanted to stop those monopolies from happening. So I agree with you in this sense, that it's okay.
But they happened.
Under communism,